We're now live on YouTube.
Thank you very much. Good evening, members. Welcome back, almost. Slightly strange, and it's a very strange scene, but apparently it's March last year that we were all together. It seems an awful lot longer than that. So welcome. Welcome officers and welcome members of the public. They're here on YouTube, Planning Applications Committee for the 20th of May. Pardon me. Firstly, can Mr. Scott, we have the fire instructions?
Thank you, Chairman. There will be no fire drill tonight. The fire alarm is loud, continuous ring. If the fire alarm rings, please leave the building promptly and calmly using the stairs next to the lift if possible. The fire escape in the council chamber should only be used as a last resort. Do not stop to gather personal belongings and do not use the lift. The evacuation point is at street level in the Knoll Road car park. The assembly point is indicated by a green sign. Do not leave the assembly point until you are told it is safe to do so. Lastly, if you have reduced mobility and the fire alarm rings, please make yourself known to myself.
Thank you very much indeed. Just as a matter of information, we will be dealing with the planning applications first. That's numbers 5, 6 and 7 on your agenda, and then we will be picking up on the performance report and monitoring report after that. Can we please have the apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chairman. I have received apologies from Councillor Barnett. Councillor Sharon Gallagher is subbing for him. I've received apologies from Councillor Morley and Councillor John Skipper.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Sharon, again. Are you agreeable that I sign the minutes of the last meeting? Yep. Thank you. Right. Have all members got a copy of the updates? If not, please indicate that you haven't. And that's the Councillor Gallagher first. If you've picked up that message, Ken, when you speak, please unmute your microphone and then mute it again, because we've got a rather large area to speak across. Thank you. Thank you very much. Declarations we will deal with on each item, which takes us through to the first item on page 15 of the agenda, 24 Park Avenue, Camberley. Are there any declarations on this item? No. Thank you. And Mrs. Bishop, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The site that we're looking at this evening is 24 Park Avenue. Members who were here last summer may recall that we had a scheme for 6 units on this site, which has gone to appeal. The scheme before us this evening is for 3. So it's before you just lost it. Right, this is the site. It's to the south of Park Avenue in Camberley. This is looking at the existing house. So on the left-hand side, it's the view into the site from Park Avenue, and the view on the right is from inside, looking out towards the Park Avenue street scene. This is looking down Park Avenue towards Park Road, and you can't quite see everything on the screen, but you can see 22 is the view of the site from the back of the site, looking towards the existing house, but looking specifically towards 22 Park Avenue. I want particularly to draw your attention to the width of the road. As you know, this part of Camberley hasn't got particularly wide roads. Shall you do some? Okay, so the next page. This is looking towards the back of the site. So on the left-hand side, you've got the view towards 13 and 17 Kingsley Avenue, and on the right, you have the view towards 31 and 35 Kingsley Avenue. So, this is the scheme that we're looking at this evening. It is for 3 detached houses. One of the things I'd like to bring to members' attention is that this part of Camberley is characterised by double-fronted houses on wide plots, and they are invariably served by their own single drives. The scheme, as you will see on the plan, has a single access drive, and it leads to a communal drive that serves all 3 properties. This is not typical of this part of Camberley, where, as I said before, each property has its own drive. One of the things you'll notice is that the 2 plots on the right-hand side of the site are narrower than Unit 1, which is on the left. Unit 1 is more characteristic of what you see, double-fronted house, with the emphasis on the width of the house, whereas with Units 2 and 3, they are narrower, with the longest elevation being deep into the site rather than across, which is not characteristic of the area. Now, I'd also like to draw your attention particularly to Unit 2. These are 4-bedroom houses. Now, as you will see, that there are only potential for 2 car spaces. Now, the County Highway Authority, in terms of the number of car parking spaces, they're quite happy. The concern that we have is that at the moment they are showing a lovely landscape frontage, but in practical terms, the concern that we have is that within a very short time, that landscape frontage will be eroded and it will be hard surfaced. We could condition it ultimately, but the harm that we have identified in terms of landscape character in front would be gone. So we do not want to see additional car parking going out onto Park Avenue. That's not characteristic of the area. Again, drawing your attention to the width of the plots, again, they do not reflect characteristic of the area.
Right.
So as you'll see from the committee report, we are raising objection on the size of the houses, particularly in terms of their width, particularly units 2 and 3, the communal drive, the plot widths, and again are too narrow. As you see, we are recommending for refusal on grounds of character. You'll also note, if I can get to the next one. This is Unit 1. As you'll see, it is a double-fronted property with the garage to the side. That does reflect this part of the town. As you'll see with 2 and 3, they are much narrower. They have a door to one side and then just one part of the house rather than double fronted. And again, the same is true of number of Unit 3. the indicative planting plan to what they have shown here, given the tree loss that was referred to in a lot of the representations that took place a couple of years ago now. This scheme is not good enough as far as we're concerned. Extensive tree loss occurred on the site. We expect extensive trees to go back in. So they have provided this as an indicative planting plan, but from our perspective, it's not good enough. This is the proposed street scene that they've provided. In reality, it doesn't actually help an awful lot because the houses are behind the trees. But for consistency, this was a view that we provided with the last application, so it's being re-provided here. There is one update to the report in as far as the council has now made a tree preservation order on this site in relation to one Scots pine, one western red cedar, and then along the rear and side boundaries with properties in Kingsley Avenue. Other than that, the recommendation is to refuse for the reasons I set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We have two speakers on this item. The first one on my list is Dr. Hosty. Is he in the room?
I am. I'm here.
Do you want to turn your camera on, Mr. Hosty, if you haven't already?
I have.
Okay. Basically, it's a spotlight.
Can you see me yet?
Not yet. Yes, there you are. Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. And welcome. You have 4 minutes, and we will indicate when you have 1 minute left, and the time will start whenever you're ready. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all. I'm Andrew Hosty. I live at number 26 Park Avenue, and I speak on a number of the residents of Park Avenue and Kingsley Avenue who wish to strongly object to this planning application. So today I speak not just for myself, but also on behalf of 16 neighbouring households. As you're aware, this application has caused huge concern and distress within the local community. Some 197 objections received to date. This significant number should stand as clear evidence of the public interest and feelings towards this plan. It should be recognised, as a large number as this is, we were severely constrained by COVID rules from lobbying for more support. It's likely that many of the 478 objectors to the previous 4-house scheme would also oppose this one too. This application has rightly received a high volume of public interest, predominantly centred around the loss of designated and established woodland vegetation, but also because the application is so out of keeping with the character of the area. Ms Bishop identified the great deal of concern in the local community with regards to the loss of some 180 mature trees, the same week that Surrey Council declared the first of 2 climate emergencies. Whilst this may not be material to current planning applications, we believe this was to circumvent your rules to protect the environment and our community, policy CP 14A. Further distress has been caused through a severe 3-fold increase in road noise from the M3, evidenced by before and after readings. This has resulted in material harm to the character of the area. Numerous applications of this type over the recent years have all been rejected or withdrawn after huge public outcry with support from your office's work. It is remarkable that this application hasn't been withdrawn, given that the developer has now submitted a plan for a different 2-house development on this same site. It is evident that residents of Surrey Heath and yourselves, our councillors, have had enough of such proposals, and this is another opportunity to tell developers that this is not acceptable in our borough. Our planning officer, Sarita Bishop, and tree officer, Alistair Barnes, deserve and have our sincere thanks and appreciation for the diligent work they continue to do related to this matter. We do not have time to go through all of the reasons outlined in your office's recommendations to refuse. It's a 36-page document. But we would ask all interested parties to refer to the report, which is on the council meeting's website. Her case is very compelling. The huge environmental destruction that has already taken place at number 24 over the last 20 months or so has caused an enormously negative impact on the environment, the residents and the local amenities previously enjoyed by your constituents. This proposal has only very sketchy plans to remediate the damage done. The drawings are misleading and include trees from neighbouring properties that suggest a much more extensive plan than is in reality proposed. We believe any proposed development should be made contingent on a detailed and substantial remediation plan that will be enforced and monitored by our council officers. Whilst the stress endured by all throughout this arduous planning process is not part of the reason to reject, we feel it should be noted, particularly as some of it could easily be avoided by withdrawing proposals once they've been superseded.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Also, we would like you to note that in advance of this process of objection, our planning consultants wrote in our objection letter to suggest that we as neighbours were not opposed to any and all development, but that any should be, as Miss Bishop's report states, abide by the hedged estates character of the area, the CP2 of the Sustainable Development and Design, DM9 of the Surrey Heath Core Strategy and Development Plan for the Borough, Guiding Principles HEs 1, 2 and 3 of the Western Urban Character Document 2012. It is strongly felt this document will harm the character and appearance of the local area, and it is in direct contravention of these principles. It is for these reasons, the planning officer's recommendations to review this application must be upheld, and we would urge you to take that course of action. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much indeed. Can you please state that Councillor, members will be asking you questions on a planning nature, and the first one is Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. My comment is in fact not related to the presentation that's just been given because I couldn't hear a word of it. I was expecting this presentation sound to be fed into the audio system that we're using for communications internally here, which I rely on because of my deafness. It appears that it's not being fed into the audio system at all. So I regret I didn't hear a single word of what was said. Sorry.
Not sure, but apologies, we'll see what we can do about that. Members, do you have any questions for the speaker on a planning nature? No, thank you very much indeed, Dr. Hosty. And now, I'm going to get this wrong. Mr. McIntaggart, you'll have to confirm the pronunciation for me.
I'm here. Can you hear me? Good evening.
Good evening to you. Can you just bear with us one moment, please?
Of course.
Which should link to the sound, which should then link to the audio system.
Just while we're waiting, can you tell me how you pronounce your name, please?
Yeah, it's McEntigart.
Okay, yeah, I can try that.
Something I must have done got it in here. Thank you.
Thank you.
No. Okay.
Then can you hear me now, Ben?
I can hear you. Sorry, yeah, I can hear you, no problem whatsoever.
Yes, the speaker to speak. So we can...
Right. Thank you for that. Now, can I ask you to commence? And it's the same principle. You have 4 minutes, and you'll be told when there's 1 minute left. The time will start whenever you're ready. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. I'm Paul McKentigall and I live at 15 Kingsley Avenue, where I've lived for over 12 years, and my garden abuts the southern boundary of 24 Park Avenue. So I've been following this matter very closely for a number of years due to my apprehension as to what had happened to 24 when it was sold and how it would affect my garden, the woodland vista, and how it would affect all of us. I think we can see that it hasn't been brilliant over the last 2 years for all of us who live here and for the authorities involved trying to best resolve this living nightmare that it's become. I have to endure flooding in my garden and alongside my house, same as my neighbours at number 17 Kingsley Avenue. We've lost all the woodland vista, no more sightings of badgers, foxes, bats and deer, which used to live in the garden at 24 Park Avenue, and I assume they've gone forever. I've reported all these matters to the council, and it's entirely due to the brutal vegetation and tree removal in the garden of Park Avenue in July 2019. The best way to tackle this disgusting land clearing practice is to enforce a local bylaw that ensures all tree surgeons must pay for a licence that allows them to only work in our area on anything over 2 metres with their direct permission. Case in point of this is 16 Parkway, Camberley, where the new owners came in recently and felled at least 6 fully grown fir trees to improve the light to the house frontage. This front is now an ugly eyesore and will no doubt never be reinstated. Following on from my dear friend Andrew Hosty, Dr. Andrew Hosty, sorry, I would firstly like to also thank Sarita and Alistair Barnes, your arboriculturists, for their thorough and professional detailed reports about the planning application around 24 Park Avenue, which has a long and protracted history dating back to 1978. We then leap forward to more recent times and how we are facing the latest plan, of which consists of 3 houses along the front of the plot. The strength of feeling is very high, as there have been nearly 700 objections to these 2 objections thus far, and not one letter of support. I think that speaks volumes. I've also been bemused and awaiting clarity on this plan and the replanting schedule, as a number of the trees that they are laying claim to in their site plan drawings are actually TPO trees in my garden. And so I'm intrigued to know how they're going to remedy this, and they've also made no reference to the trees on their plot, which are now dying due to the root damage they suffered when the land was industriously cleared, including root balls in 2019, so as to hide their tracks. We lodged a very detailed objection to this plan in November 2020 through our planning consultants, so as to show how the local residents feel, and beyond belief, we are very strong that we are beyond strongly that this willful destruction of our area and environment has to stop, and that the unscrupulous developers must
Just to advise, 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Go around destroying areas seemingly at will. This current plan would be similar to the one that was put forward around the redevelopment of 3032 Kingsley Avenue in 2012 by forming a cul-de-sac. That was refused by the council, and the plan to squeeze another house on the plot of 25 Kingsley Avenue, which also the council refused. These sort of plans of cramming as many smaller houses into is a common and disgusting practice, which completely ruins the character, style and building lines of a beautiful hedged estate, which then leads to a lot of on-road parking and dangerously affects the visual displays of cars when moving around the area. I feel that we have an excellent opportunity to work here together to maintain and improve our area for everyone to enjoy. So I would ask the committee to please agree with Mrs. Bishop and refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, do you have any questions for the speaker? No. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Tamper, can I just check, did you hear Mrs. Bishop's presentation?
Yes, I heard Mrs. Bishop's presentation.
It was the first speaker you couldn't hear.
It was the first speaker I couldn't hear. I'm just experimenting now to see whether if I could join that Zoom meeting, that I could hear it directly through my iPad.
Yes, or if the first speaker has no objection, I think in fairness, I was going to ask him if he wouldn't mind representing, which would be the best for Mr. Scott. Sorry.
I was just going to say that if I can join this meeting now, we can test whether it's better than what we were doing previously. It's the speaker to represent. I am currently waiting to get that in.
Somebody let Councillor Tapper into the meeting.
Okay, it appears I've joined the Zoom meeting, so maybe you can try it.
So I'm just.
Okay, so we're going to get the public speaker to read you the speech, and if it's okay, we can just ask him to declare that it's the same as the first speech, which you did.
Right, Dr. Hosty, can you, pardon me, please, would you mind reading your speech again? And if before you do so, would you please confirm that this is the exact same speech you gave first time round? And that will be equitable to all parties. Are you able to do that, please? Thank you.
Yes, I'm willing and able.
Can you confirm it is the same speech, please?
Yes, it is the same speech using exactly the same notes.
Please proceed. Thank you very much indeed for your perseverance.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Andrew Hosty. I live at number 26 Park Avenue, and I speak on behalf of the residents of Park Avenue and Kingsley Avenue who wish to strongly object to this planning application. So today I speak not just for myself, but also on behalf of around 16 neighbouring households. As you are aware, this application has caused huge concern and distress within the local community. Some 197 objections received to date. This significant number should stand as clear evidence of the public interest and feelings towards this plan. It should be recognised, as large a number as this is, we were severely constrained by COVID rules from lobbying for more support. It is likely that many of the 478 objectors to the previous 4-house scheme would also oppose this one too. This application has rightly received a high volume of public interest and outcry, predominantly centred around the loss of designated and established woodland vegetation, but also because the application is so out of keeping with the character of the area. Mrs. Bishop identified the great deal of concern in the local community with regards to the loss of around 180 mature trees, the same week that Surrey Council declared the first of 2 climate emergencies. Whilst this may not be material to current planning applications, we believe this was to circumvent your rules to protect the environment and our community, policy CP 14A. Further distress has been caused through a severe 3-fold increase in road noise from the M3, evidenced by before and after readings. This has resulted in material harm to the character of the area. Numerous applications of this type over the recent years have all been rejected or withdrawn after public outcry, with support from your office's work. It's remarkable that this application hasn't been withdrawn, given that the developer has now submitted a plan for a different 2-house development on this same site. It is evident that residents of Surrey Heath and yourselves, our councillors, have had enough of such proposals, and this is another opportunity to tell developers that this is not acceptable in our borough. Our planning officer, Sarita Bishop, and tree officer, Alistair Barnes, deserve and have our sincere thanks and appreciation for the diligent work that they continue to do related to this matter. We do not have time here to go through all the reasons outlined in your officer's recommendation to refuse. It is a 36-page document, but we would ask all interested parties to refer to the report, which is on the council meeting's website. Her case is very compelling. The huge environmental destruction that has already taken place at number 24 over the last 20 months or so has caused an enormously negative impact on the environment, the residents, and the local amenities previously enjoyed by your constituents. This proposal has only very sketchy plans to remediate the damage done. The drawings are misleading and include trees from neighbouring properties, but suggest a much more extensive plan than is in reality proposed. We believe that any proposed development should be made contingent on a detailed and substantial remediation plan that will be enforced and monitored by our council officers. Whilst the stress endured by all throughout this arduous planning process is not part of the reason to reject, we feel it should be noted.
1 minute remaining.
Particularly as some of it could easily be avoided by withdrawing proposals once they've been superseded. Also, we'd like you to know that in advance, in this process, our planning consultants wrote in our objection letter to suggest that we as neighbours were not opposed to any and all development, but that any development should be, as Bishop's report states, abide by the hedged estates character of the area. CP2 of the Sustainable Development and Design, DM9 of the Surrey Heath Core Strategy and Development Plan for the Borough, Guiding Principles HE1, 2 and 3 of the Western Urban Character Document 2012. So it is strongly felt this development would harm the character and appearance of the local area, and it is in direct contravention of these principles. It is for these reasons the planning officer's recommendation to refuse this application must be upheld, and we would urge you to take that course of action. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much indeed.
Log out of the meeting. You have to log out of the Zoom meeting.
Is that right?
No.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. We're going to have a third speaker, but I understand not now. So we then move on. Councillor Lewis, you called this application in. Can I get it right? Can you briefly please advise the committee of the reasons behind the calling? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's very obvious why I've called it in. I have to say, since being a councillor, this development has caused more distress than I've dealt with in my ward. I know it's the term Dr. Hosty used, but it's not a term I use lightly, distress. Given the number of representations, I feel it's really needs to be dealt with publicly. We serve the people, and occasionally how we serve the people needs to be seen. The report itself is very comprehensive. It covers all the planning points I would like to make. So, yes, that's the reason I've called it, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, do you have any questions or comments? Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask Mrs. Bishop to confirm my own observations on Park Avenue, that although there are a large number of properties there which are double fronted, it is by no means an exclusive feature of this road. There are many properties there which are not double fronted. Thank you.
I would say that the predominant character is double fronted. Yes, there are the odd house that is not, but they are substantial houses that have wide frontages, and that is characteristic of Park Avenue.
Thank you. Any other comments? Can't see anybody. So members, we have an officer recommendation to refuse. Can I have a proposer and a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Whitcroft, Councillor Wheeler. Members, all those in agreement of the recommendation as proposed?
Voting in favour of the officer's recommendation to refuse, councillors Allaway, Galliford, Lewis, Perry, Ratteram, Betton, Gordon, Wheeler, Whitcroft, White and Hawkins.
Members against the recommendation?
Sorry, Councillor Mansfield, just to check, you were voting in favour of the officer recommendation to refuse?
That's correct.
Okay.
And Councillor Tapper is against the recommendation. Members, that has been carried 12 votes to 1. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you, speakers, if you are still there. Now on to the second item on page 53, the land east of Shangri-La West End. Whilst we do on declarations, there was a site visit Mr. Carty arranged. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Carty. And I also declare that for the some of the committee, no one of the applicants, as he was a serving councillor for a period of time, trying to see how many, but he certainly is a declaration as a serving councillor. Are there any other declarations to make, members? Yes, Councillor Mansfield.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just clarifying something with Mrs. Rickard. Yeah, I'll just say that I was asked some time ago, before this actually came back to committee, to call this in. I think, in fact, it does say that's within the paperwork. I'm sure that the party will update us accordingly. But just for the record, that was before it actually came officially, the paperwork came through. That's the only conversation I've had with Mr. Kerr. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Carty.
Yeah, just before I start, just to confirm the application didn't need to be called in, Councillor Mansfield. It was one that has been reported to committee.
Sorry, thank you very much indeed. That's fine. I was aware of that, but I thought just for openness, I'd better say that I believe I had a conversation with one of the officers, because this goes back some time, to say I was, if it comes back in, I was going to call it. So just for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Noted. Mr. Carty.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to a field within the green belt located beyond the defined settlement at West End. This application relates to the erection of 4 dwellings with attached garages and access from individual drives onto Fairfield Lane, a private road. This application follows the refusal for identical developments and subsequent dismissal of the corresponding appeal, which is in the papers. Please note the update, which includes historical planning history for the site, and I'll lead you through the plans and photos. This is the site location plan, which was provided with the application. The site lies on the north side of Fairfield Lane. To the west is Verona dwellings with Shangri-La, a bungalow to the west edge of the site. Chalet Bungalow, the Laurels, lies to the east of the application site. An access road to the immediate east of the site leads to agricultural land to the rear. I don't know what's happening with this, but it's going on.
Sure. If you just ask for next slide.
I'll leave that there. Could I go back to 2 slides, please? Sorry, back, reverse. So before now. The one before, sorry. The Chalet Bungalow, the Laurels, lies to the east of the application site. An access road to the immediate east of the site leads to agricultural land to the rear. Laurel Farm lies to the rear and east of the Laurels. The lands to the south of Fairfield Lane is now being developed for housing. The details of this layout are represented on the following slide. Next slide, please. This slide shows the application site in a wider context. The left image represents the local plan proposals map with the application site outlined in red, which falls within the green belt. The hatched area to the south of the application site represents the housing reserve site. In this area, the housing reserve site has been developed for housing and is now occupied. This is the Maltings development that lies to the east and north of Malthouse Farm. The second image to the right shows a representation of the residential layout of this development and the wider village to the west. Next slide, please. This is the application site as viewed from Fairfield Lane. Fencing in the middle distance defines the rear boundary of the application site. As can be seen, the site is devoid of developments, and the site with land to the north and beyond is visually and spatially open when viewed from Fairfield Lane and having a rural character. Next slide, please. This is the view of Fairfield Lane to the west of the application site. This demonstrates the variety of house sites form and layout. Shangri-La is set back from the dwellings to the west and is just visible to the right-hand edge of this photo, partly obscured by the tree branches. Next slide, please. This is the view of Fairfield Lane to the east of the application site. Laurels is visible to the left-hand side with the Maltings development to the right-hand side. Next slide, please. These are properties in the Maltings development which face Fairfield Lane, shown on the bottom right of this photo. These are properties on Tythe Lane. Next slide. This is the proposed layout with Shangri-La to the west and the Laurels to the east side, just on the edge of the plan. This plan shows the regular pattern of the proposed houses with garages to the side, drives and turning areas to the front. Next slide, please. These are the front elevations of the plots 1 and 2. The dwellings are broadly the same built form, but with different finishes. Next slide, please. Here are the front elevations of plots 3 and 4, which show a similar elevation approach. Next slide, please. Here are the floor plans for one of the proposed dwellings, which are nearly identical to the other proposed dwellings. The proposal will provide 4 bedrooms and include an integral garage to the side of each dwelling. The current proposal is identical to the refuse scheme, which is subsequently dismissed on appeal on all grounds. The reasons for refusal relate to the impact on green belts, the impact on character, the impact on drainage. In addition to the current application of further reasons now to be imposed in relation to the impact on the SPA. The proposal is considered to be inappropriate development in the green belt. One of the exceptions to inappropriate development in the National Planning Policy Framework is infilling in villages. Infilling is the filling of a small gap within a built-up frontage in a village. Recent case law has confirmed that the definition of a village in this context is not necessarily the defined village in a local plan, but can include built-up frontages which connect to but extend beyond the defined village edge. The inspector, in agreement with the local authority, at paragraph 7 of the appeal decision, did not consider that the proposal resulted in the infilling of the small gap, taking into consideration the size of the site, and because the site represented a physical break between the settlement edge on the north side of Fairfield Lane to the west, petering out just to the west of the application site. At paragraphs 14 and 15 of the appeal decision, it concludes that the proposal would have an adverse impact on openness and the purposes of the green belt, namely countryside encroachment and albeit limited reduction in the gap between settlements. As such, very special circumstances were required, but in this case were not sufficient to outweigh this nor unidentified harm. The inspector, in agreement with the local authority, considered the regular nature of the proposed development and drives and turning areas to the front was at odds with the more mixed character of the properties of Fairfield Lane. And this arrangement, along with its impact on the rural appearance of the site, was unacceptable on character grounds. The inspector, in agreement with the local authority, considered that it had not been demonstrated that an adequate drainage strategy had been provided and that the development could proceed without harm to flood risk. The sound contribution to offset the harms to the special protection area has not been secured. In the officer's opinion, there has been no material change in circumstances since the determination of this appeal. As such, the recommendation is to refuse this application for the reasons set out in the officer's report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Gotti. We have 2 speakers. Firstly, Mr. Guy Constantine. Can you hear me, Mr. Constantine?
Mute.
Yeah.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening. You have 4 minutes. Time will start whenever you're ready, and you will be advised 1 minute to go. So whenever you're ready, thank you very much.
Thanks, and good evening. I'm Guy Constantine, and I'm speaking on behalf of West End Action Group, of which I'm chairman, and Fairfield Lane Residents Association, of which I'm secretary. The first thing I want to say is that Fairfield Lane residents are surprised that this application has been submitted at all, since the identical application was refused by this council in June 2019, and when it went to appeal, the appeal was dismissed by the planning inspector later that year. Yet only 11 months after being dismissed, it was resubmitted with no significant changes in the application whatsoever. The only external thing that changed is that in August last year, the council's new report on housing land supply showed housing land for 4.85 years rather than the required 5 years. If this prompted for resubmission of the planning application, it was done under a misconception. The National Planning Policy Framework is very specific in paragraph 11D that if an application is inappropriate development in the green belt, it overrides any shortfall in the supply of housing land, and the fact of the shortfall becomes irrelevant and the application should be refused. Moreover, the shortfall in this case is very small, and retail space in Camberley that is becoming redundant and available for conversion to apartments would more than make up the difference. Now that leaves the arguments on which the council and the planning inspector refused the application last time. All those arguments still apply. It is clearly inappropriate development in the green belt as defined by the framework. The applicants claim it meets the exceptional circumstances listed in paragraph 145E of the framework, which is limited infilling in villages. But it does not. It is not infilling. It does not fill the extensive gap between the existing houses. There is a space on the east side of the site where there's a wide farm entrance. Even if it was infilling, it would still fall foul of the framework's overriding requirement that the openness of the area should not be harmed. Now, in this case, there was very great harm to openness. The development would block out the extensive view northwards across several fields to a skyline of distant trees, which is a key element of the character of this unadopted lane. Moreover, the uniformity of the proposed block of houses and their sheer size in relation to bungalows on either side is entirely out of keeping with the lane's character. In addition, there's a severe drainage problem. After heavy rain, a great deal of surface water runs down from the higher fields on the north of the site.
Just to advise, 1 minute left.
Thank you. And makes the whole site soggy and some of it flooded. And the proposed drainage solution is not adequate, as the council's own drainage engineer has confirmed. The proposal even has flood water running uphill against the gradient of the lane. So in summary, the site is in the green belt. It's outside the defined settlement area of West End. It would be the application would be very harmful to the openness of the lane and out of keeping with the rural character of the lane. It is not infilling. It is inappropriate development in the green belt. The small shortfall in 5-year supply of land is irrelevant. The severe drainage problem is not solved, and the planning inspector has already dismissed this application in its previous form. So I ask you also to refuse it. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, do you have any questions of planning nature for the speaker? No, thank you very much indeed. And now we have Mr. Galvin, who is speaking to us. Mr. Galvin, are you there? Before you start, apologise for the slight typo on the applicant name on the papers. We rather got it mixed up, and I looked at it and I thought, that's not right. It was nothing intentional, it's just something wrong. But anyway, be as it may, you have 4 minutes, and just to remind you, the time you'll be advised when there's 1 minute remaining, and you may well be asked if there are any questions. So the time will start whenever you're ready, please.
Okay, yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Thank you.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, fine. Okay. Well, I intended to address the pertinent issues, and I'd actually also got some copies of the points I was about to raise, but apparently COVID has seen fit not to let that happen. So anyway, the principal point of refusal from the planning officer is that the land is greenbelt and that the land in question falls within the greenbelt. My response to that is that during the course of our initial application, the first of which was significantly delayed, 90 plus houses were built or were in the process of being built on former greenbelt land facing the 4 plots a few meters to the front and directly in front of the site under current application. Recently, planning permission was also given to 2 dwellings on the farmland, i.e. Laurel Farm, the nearest building being less than about 50 meters away from our boundary and to the north, that is, and the other dwelling about the same distance to the right of the first, both of which were also greenbelt and enjoyed a swift 3-month process to permission, which is considerably shorter than the one we have, right, to permission or to refusal. There are significant differences in our applications in that our own application, we had 3 months of delay until the application was validated, while Laurel Farm, first application was validated same day. We were instructed by the planning office to provide every possible survey, which we did at considerable cost, adding up to a total of 162 documents provided. The Laurel Farm application submitted 22 documents, missing out schematic surface, water drainage layout, ecology reports in any detail, ecological walkthrough survey reports. West End Parish Council passed this without comment. There were also 5 letters of support, whereas initially we received 140, which I think the last gentleman probably was part of that objections. From many were either outside of the village. For instance, complaint from Goldsworth Park in Woking, and other dwellings entirely remote from the site, still in the village, but miles away from it. The land was laid out as building plots by the owners in 1950s, and that's where all the existing houses at the moment are built on, right? And have since had a number of dwellings which have been built along the building line of the 4 plots in question. For example, one property built on the original plots called Lavender House, formerly was called Lavender Cottage, was initially refused a greenbelt on the basis it was subsequently allowed on appeal to the Secretary of State on the 20th of May in 1966. Its planning reference was GBR 4726, but that's by the by. The fact is, greenbelt status has since been turned over on all 4 sides of the 4 plots in question. The rejection of this application based
you have 1 minute remaining.
Greenbelt reason is specious to say that the application is considered inappropriate. A developer of the greenbelt, for which apparently very special circumstances do not exist, we find this unfair, and the argument is for refusal without merit as far as we're concerned. As an aside, I would like to know what very special circumstances are in this case. Drainage. A drainage objection was raised on the proposal, but we replied, we actually instructed to provide drainage reports to considerable extent, which involved excavation of test holes. These reports are still available. They were provided us by a professional company and showed no reasons whatsoever why these plots couldn't be currently built on, because they're on the same land and the same plots that have already been built on over the years. As far as Surrey Wildlife Trust, we submitted 2 ecology wildlife
4 minutes.
First and second applications with
That's
significant.
4 minutes.
Right, okay.
Can I ask you to wind up, please, to close your comments? Thank you.
Right. Okay. So no, I've had no time whatsoever to present here, have I? Really, that's the long and short of it. What I would say, as far as the appeal was concerned, the reason for the appeal went ahead is because of the fact that the council planning officers did not bring this in the first place to committee, despite the fact they knew full well that Mr. Gandon was serving at the time and an ex-serving minister at the time that it was actually given.
Right. I'm going to call that the time there, but thank you very much indeed. Members, do you have any questions of a planning nature for the speaker. Round. No question. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Calvin. Members, do you have any comments on this item? Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask Mr. Carter, please, to show on probably the site context slide that we had earlier, whereabouts on the Laurel Farm land these two new accepted planning applications are located, so we can see where they are in relation to the current. No, the slide that you were on just before that one, that's probably the best one to go back to. Yes, that one.
Yes, I can use it sticks, but I think I can get the points to not work. There was a permission for replacement of 2 barns in this area with a dwelling. There was previous history to that, so it sounds like it's duplicated, but it's the same site, same buildings that were done. And I understand that back in 2002, there was a lawful development certificate for the siting of a caravan in this location here. That's the history I can gauge from Laurel Farm itself.
When we went on our site visit, the indication was given at the site visit, if you remember, Chair, you were there as well, that the farm entrance, which has been referred to, which is immediately to the east of the site in question, leads, in fact, immediately up alongside the fence, also the hedge, which divides that planning site from the Laurels to what we understood, were given to understand at the visit, was to be the new development, which is almost immediately to the top of the slide there. There are 2 small squares there around that area. That was the area where, on the site visit, we were indicated that that's where these new approved planning applications were to be built. Is that not the case? Were we not given correct information on our site visit?
Right. I didn't know the history, and I said I would update you on the night. I was asked to look at the Laurel Farm site, which, as far as I was aware, was that collection of buildings and that field there. And what I've been able to gauge is the replacement of 2 barns in the Laurel Farm complex and a lawful development certificate for a caravan back in the 2000s. That's the information I can give you tonight. That's the history we've just checked with Sirius. That's the history. I think there's a number of permissions on the same site that relate to the same building.
Thank you very much. Councillor Alloway and then Councillor Mansfield.
Working. Shall I shout instead?
No, we need you to go to the speaker to pick up on the table. We got those on.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Right, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, carry on, I can see you.
Two things. Yes, I can confirm, being on the planning committee, that the barn is the conversions into two dwellings. Nothing else on that site I'm aware of has got permission for any new dwellings. So I think that's probably a bit misleading. Also, the land south of Fens Lane is not greenbelt. It's actually land beyond the countryside, which was reserve site for 25, 30 years. And yeah, that's the 2 points I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mansfield.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Allaway, because you're obviously far more familiar with this particular lane than I am, being your area into which you reside fairly close. I think it sounds to me that this is an extremely complicated application. Can I just ask the officer, Mr. Carty, could you possibly put up the slide that showed the sort of inbuilt plan of the area, where it was the quite detailed? It was the one. That's it, yeah. Can I just confirm that my understanding is that okay, the area where we've got to the left, the large volume of housing, that's already the estate that's being developed, correct? So the land to the right, which is sort of the lined land, can you just give me the definition of that land again? Because that was something, sorry, sort of, I had a different view of that, what that was. Thank you.
The area hatched.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the housing reserve sites for West End. So it's been allocated for housing in reserve since the 2000 plan. So, and when it became allocated as a housing reserve site, it was countryside beyond the green belt and not in the green belt.
Sorry, Chair, could I just actually say it was first designated in the 1984 draft plan, which became the 1987 local plan. So it's been designated for housing for nearly 30 years now. And it was specifically excluded from the greenbelt designation to be reserved for long-term development. It was never part of the greenbelt in the borough.
Thank you for that. Mr. Chairman, can I come back and do you mind if I ask another? Because this is quite important, because there's so much development going on in West End, and it's the unintended consequences where, to me, this is just, it's not so many houses but if we can go to the next slide down that actually shows the site, thank you. So, okay, the land at the back that you referred to, which is beyond the actual fence line, because obviously this is the land area that the application is for. Can you just give me the definition, and possibly Councillor Allaway, who probably knows this area extremely well, what is the definition of that land that is beyond that fence? Just for clarification for my own view, because, and the reason I ask the question, and then I'll give way, is very simple, that if, I'm always minded, I know the monitor obviously is here, so I'm very careful as to what I'm going to say, but I'm just minded that if that, could that ever then become a road, this area here that we're talking about, to access what could go on further in that field beyond. So therefore, if these houses were there, so could something happen in that field beyond that fence?
Well, that land is all green belts.
Right.
So any proposal would have to be, if it were to be submitted, all such works would have to be assessed under the fact that it's green belt.
Thank you, that's my understanding. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other members wish to ask a question of the officers? I got one. Can I just clarify, please? The application in front of us is exactly the same application that was refused by the planning inspectorate.
Yep. Yes, it is identical.
Thank you. Right, members, if there are no further questions, we have a recommendation in front of us. Is there a proposer and a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Allaway, Councillor Lewis, and then all those in agreement with the recommendation to refuse.
Councillors Allaway, Galliford, Gordon, Lewis, Perry, Ratteram, Wheeler, Tapper, Whitcroft, White and Hawkins.
Against? Abstain?
I believe there was a site visit and I didn't go, so I don't think I can vote.
Doesn't matter.
No, the site visit was in advance of the meeting and you aren't able to vote on this application.
In which case, I'm for the recommendation.
Thank you.
Now members voting in abstention. Councillor Mansfield.
12. One abstention.
Members, that is carried 12 votes with 1 abstention. Thank you very much. Thank you, members. On to item 3 on page 77. The land to the side and rear of 154 Guildford Road, West End. Can I advise the committee, before I do any declarations, that there are some confidential papers attached to this item, and if members so feel inclined or move into areas which are covered by that confidential section, the advice I received from the officers is that the committee will then move into a closed session for this item. So I just flag that up to you. Are there any declarations for members to make? Councillor Mansfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, this application has got quite a lot of history to it, and I think my name is mentioned within the documents, but the fact that it was first called in by myself.
Thank you, noted. Nothing else, Mr. Carty, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This called-in application relates to a previously developed site within the Greenbelt, beyond the edge of the settlement of West End. This retrospective proposal is to provide 2 gypsy pitches, including a mobile home and tourer caravan, a pitch from the site to the rear of the existing house with a shared access onto Guildford Road. As you are aware, the application for the retention of this mobile home has been previously reported to this committee. When the application was last reported, the resolution was to grant, subject to the inclusion of a 5-year temporary limited period and provision of contributions from SAM and SAG. Following the committee resolution, the agent has confirmed that they do not wish to have a temporary 5-year limitation, and the application has been reported back to the committee on this basis. As before, information has been previously provided in relation to the personal circumstances of the occupants of the mobile homes. This provides medical information which has been treated as confidential and is provided as a confidential report which summarises this information. No further information has been subsequently provided by the applicant on these matters. Pardon me. Please note the updates, including the updates to the planning history. You will note that the lawful development certificate application that is subject to an appeal under the inquiry's procedure. The inquiry is proposed to be held in August 2021. I will lead you through the photos and plans. Slide one, please. The application site lies on the west side of Guildford Road, falling within the Greenbelt located just outside of the settlement of West End. The application site includes the area for mobile homes and access outlined in red, but does not include the host dwelling and yard outlined in blue. The application site was previously part of the garden of the host dwelling. The wider site fronts onto Guildford Road, close to the road junction with Kings Road to the north. Residential boxes lie to both flanks with more open land to the rear. The land opposite falls within the settlement of West End. The wider site was wedge-shaped, reducing in width towards the rear. The plan to the right provides a wider plan that shows the west side of Guildford Road being more open, with the east side being more built up, reflecting the contrast between the settlement and Greenbelt land designations. The key constraint is the Greenbelt. No other key statutory constraints, such as proximity to listed buildings, will apply. The site location plan also includes the existing outbuilding and commercial use to the rear and the existing mobile homes. An existing garage is shown at the front of the existing dwelling. Slide 2. This is the main house on the site, which is to be retained. Next slide, please. These are the mobile homes on site that relate to this application. Next slide, please. This is the outbuilding to the rear of the site. Another caravan has been sited on this land and is the subject of a separate application as indicated on the update. Next slide, please. This is the site layout for the proposal, which shows the access road to the north flank, with the end of the mobile homes facing this access road. Parking is provided on a drive to the front of each mobile home. The proposal is considered to be an appropriate development, which would also have an adverse impact on owners of this part of the Greenbelt and rural character. As set out in the paragraph 7.4.2 on page 85 of the original officer report. Paragraph 24 of the National Planning Policy for Travel Sites indicates the consideration of the following issues specific to this case should be made. The existing level of provision and need for sites, the availability or lack of alternative accommodation for the applicants and other personal circumstances of the applicant. With regards to the needs of the sites, the increased need expressed on the update must be borne in mind. It was considered that the application could be supported, but on the basis that the permission was for a limited period of 5 years. Temporary permission would mean that the proposal could be reviewed in terms of the needs of the family and the need to supply sites and pitches and the policy position at that time. It is considered that a condition to ensure that it is provided for a limited period to allow such a review to take place. The original recommendation for a permanent permission for this proposal on the first report was refused as set out on pages 89 and 90 due to the Greenbelt harm, for which very special circumstances do not exist to outweigh this and any of the harm, and also the impact on the special protection area. Notwithstanding any personal circumstances provided by the applicant and acknowledged increase in the need for pitches and size, this has not changed. As such, for the application for a permanent permission here, it is therefore recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Carty. Thank you. There are no speakers. Members? Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just confirm that if this particular application is refused, the temporary application still remains in force?
No, they lose the permission. There is the running appeal, which I mentioned at the start of my speech, for the inquiry procedure, for the lawfulness to have two caravans on the site. But in terms of this application, that would be it. We would be refusing this application.
Councillor Mansfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is obviously, this particular application is one that's been going on for a number of years. And I've referred back, in fact, to some of the original application was registered back in 14th December 2018, which was on the last meeting that was held when this was actually this temporary temporary permissions granted for the 5-year term. It comes as no surprise that once we actually gave them even a temporary measure, they don't wish to actually make the contribution as requested. It's also interesting that what the officer said, and members, I suggest you, I hope you picked up on it, that another caravan has actually since been put onto the site. It's obviously a very delicate issue in so much as I don't wish to extend the meeting because obviously of the confidential medical information that is there and attached, and I won't refer to that in any way. However, I would like to point out that going back, must have been 2 years ago, and I'm sure the officer, Mr. Carty, will correct me or clarify, that we did in fact, a councillor who was on the Planning Applications Committee at the time, when referring to that particular confidential information, did in fact suggest to the committee that we seek further information regards the medical situation, and in fact that was also refused by the applicant, and it was at that stage then that the temporary permission was granted. This, at the end of the day, is totally inappropriate development on the green belt. It is a matter of a great deal of local concern, as I'm sure the officer is aware. I've spoken to the officer many times on this. I know that head of regulatory, Jenny Rickard, I've had to speak to on a number of occasions because of the other activities that go on within this site. And that's referred to also within the planning application as regards the industrial nature of some of the activities that go on, and it's referred to slightly in a small way on the films, the film pictures that you showed. But I would just, so I fully support the officer's recommendation to refuse this, but I would like it just clarified also that Mr. Carty, if you could just make a comment on my point that we did in fact ask at the time for further information regards the medical situation because of some of the details within and the dates of all of that information, and that was refused. But I'm sure you can clarify that before or otherwise. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, that is the case, and I've spotted it towards the bottom of page 78. And that was an earlier update, that was from September committee, when we did indicate that it was resolved at the due committee to defer for further evidence and clarification, for which the applicant did not provide further details. So that is the correct chain of events.
Thank you, because it is an important point, because again, because of the, and I respect what the chairman has said, that we don't want to go into the detail, because, and I'm not going to do that, but it is important just to note that that information was extremely detailed, and really we should have had more.
Councillor Mansfield, you are getting close to the boundary on this one. I just like that up.
Too close, but it has to be understood that that was requested and turned down.
I think Councillor Mansfield, I think the committee understand that you are getting close to the boundary on that line. We are looking at the application for the 2 sites. Mr. Carty has dealt with the other issues, and I just feel that you're beginning to get to areas which I think we'd rather not go. We understand the committee have had the opportunity of reading the papers, and I just feel that you're just beginning to just get awfully close to a very thin dividing line.
I'm happy to give way. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, are there any other questions? Did I see any other signs? No. Thank you, members. We have an officer recommendation to refuse. Are the Councillor Wheeler, and I will second that one. All those in agreement with the officer recommendation? Unanimous. Thank you, members. That is unanimous. Thank you. We now go back to the agenda. We are now going to the performance report, which was contained. Yes, sorry, Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. Just before we continue, I wonder if somebody could assist Councillor Tapper with, I'm getting a lot of, it's like having a constant buzz in my ear, which is very distracting, and it's actually quite difficult to hear and to concentrate. And I don't know if it's your iPad, Councillor Tapper, or what it is. It wasn't there right at the beginning, but it is happening now. I've tried to move to this side, but I still, it's sort of like having my own form of tinnitus. I don't know if there's anything that can be done to help.
Right.
No,
Yeah, I think we'll deal with it.
Right. Councillor Tapper, apparently if you log out.
Is that of the Zoom meeting we're talking about? Yes, I have already logged out of the Zoom meeting. So if there is,
you still being buzzed?
I did report last year when we were in this chamber that there is a fault with the audio system in this chamber, and that there is feedback harm. I reported this to the IT people, and it appears that nothing has actually happened at all.
It's not been yet.
Could I just say, Councillor Tapper, we are actually intending to replace the entire audio system in the council chamber because of those various problems. But at the moment, for things which are entirely beyond our control, these things are taking longer than we might like.
And Councillor Tapper, can I suggest maybe you plug into the microphone next door and see if that is any better?
Try that.
While you're doing that, Councillor Mansfield, you were indicating you wish to speak.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I've just had a bit of a buzz. I've got to go and deal with something, so I hope you don't mind if I can.
No, thank you for that. That's two of you being buzzed, so I couldn't resist it. Sorry. Thank you very much, Councillor Mansfield. Right. No.
No, that there appears to be no difference whatsoever between the two mic systems. It does appear that it's actually the audio system itself which is at fault.
Actually, if you could stay in that one, it might just be that it's slightly further away and it's not coming back to the mic.
Right, I'm sorry,
If you don't mind, sorry, Councillor Tapper, if you don't mind, just a request for Councillor Wheeler, if you do stay plugged into the one to your left, and that might.
On this side,
Yeah, so your left, yeah.
Why not come over to where Councillor Mansfield was?
Do we have a white thing, and I'll do.
Oh, one of you. Somebody try.
It's probably better if I do because.
Councillor Whitcroft, are you getting any feedback at all, or are you all right?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Yeah. This is strange being up here, you know, this is the first time I've ever done it. Must have been the last time as well.
I've got a white.
Oh.
You get a whole different perception and view of the place. I've never been here for 22 years, this is the first time.
Right, so are you going back on the Wi-Fi or the YouTube or Councillor Tapper? How are we communicating with you?
You are communicating with me with the audio system that is actually in the council chamber itself.
Right.
I have logged completely out of Zoom.
Okay, right. Thank you for that. Now, we go back onto the agenda. Strange times we have. We're on to the performance report, which is on page 7 of the agenda, and Mr. Partington is going to take us through that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This report provides an overview of planning applications and appeals performance for the past 2 financial years. By way of update and correction, this report does not need to be reported to executive. This current report before you tonight is self-explanatory, but I'll briefly like to highlight a few key points. Firstly, the report recognises how COVID has had a knock-on effect on the speed of determining planning applications. You will note under Table 1 on page 8 how on average the service has met government targets, but how the performance notably dipped during quarters 1 and 2 of last year. Secondly, workloads remain high, and there is a backlog of work within the service, partly due to staff and resource changes. As a consequence, officers are becoming increasingly reliant on extension of time agreements, which accounted for approximately a third of all decisions made in the past 2 years. However, positive steps have been taken, and in March 2021, Melissa Turney started working for the authority, replacing Ross Callaghan as a senior planning officer. We also continue to make use of contractors. Additionally, the service recruited Reno van der Hoven, a senior planning officer who supports the corporate enforcement service, and is here tonight to answer any questions you may have on the annex and enforcement performance. Thirdly, in addition to planning applications, officers are responsible for all other types of applications, and that adds to the workload that officers have. However, in October 2020, the service successfully introduced a revised pre-application service, which now includes more optional services for developers and includes a household service. The majority of applications we determined are under delegated powers. Last year, just 5% were determined by the committee, which typically are the most contentious or complex applications. Despite COVID, it was very much business as normal, and notably, planning applications reported and determined by this committee included some key sites, including Steel, Deep Cut developments, and Gordon Murray design developments. Fourthly, the service's planning appeals performance has dipped in the last year. Table 3 on page 10 highlights this. Having regard to delegated decisions appeal, approximately 2/3 of these appeals are won. 6 of the 19 lost in the last year were residential greenbelt refusals. The appeal success for committee decisions has been less successful, with 50% won. Paragraph 3.7 on page 12 lists the committee decisions made against the officer recommendation and those allowed on appeal, but also those dismissed on appeal in the past 2 years. In summary, this service has performed well during different times. This coming year, we'll obviously see a period of change with the new head of planning starting and Jenny Rickard retiring. The challenge for this coming year will be to maintain, but also improve current performance, in particular the appeal success. We also need to look at reducing the extension of time agreements, to continue to review the approach to the pre-application process, and to improve customer care. This service can also look at training opportunities, both for officers, but also importantly for members as well. And finally, the potential to maybe consider a peer review to look for ways to improve performance. So I'm now going to hand over to Reno, and I believe Louise as well, who's going to say some words on the enforcement side of things. Thank you.
Good evening, members. Just very short and sweet. I hope that report is self-explanatory. It's split into a couple of sections: performance management, dealing with the section on our IT systems that we've been reviewing, the enforcement register, that is an ongoing, very significant project. And then section 5 on page 4, you will have high priority investigations. Can I ask that members, if you do have any questions on section 5, that you either ask me after the meeting or we can discuss that under the exemption section. And lastly, section 6, I'll hand you over to the verbal update by Louise. Thank you.
I just keep it short and sweet, but it's just about an update on resource. So, it was agreed that a new compliance officer would be recruited. That job is now out for recruitment. We're due to interview at the beginning of June, and we will follow up and let you know when that person is actually in post. And they will be to support Reno with regards to the enforcement matters.
Thank you very much, the three of you. Members, I'm going for Councillor Allaway first.
This is that right after you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thank you to the three officers there for the explanations of progress so far. I would like to ask, in the vein of trying to improve performance in having appeals dismissed, i.e. not overturned by the planning inspector, those ones that were, which were committee overturns, can we have a lessons learned investigation and try and see, what needs to change so we get a more reliable performance of
if I just refer everybody to the page where I've listed the different applications, that's actually page 12. In many respects, some of that discussion is for training opportunities at a later date. For example, in terms of the 5-year housing land supply. We all know about Woodside Cottage, which obviously officers originally recommended refusal, but the housing land supply issue changed during the course of the inquiry. There are other examples in terms of character issues whereby officers recommended approval, but obviously members were perfectly entitled to come up with a different conclusion on those issues. And indeed, the inspector recognises that. You will notice that there were cost awards. Generally, those cost awards were refused, demonstrating that whilst the members came to a different conclusion, the decision-making was not unreasonable in that respect. So I think there's a bit of a combination, some training need, but in some circumstances, members are perfectly entitled to come to your own conclusion, and that's what you do as part of your committee.
So can I just come back in here? But yes, I mean, lessons learned is part and parcel of the discussions that are ongoing, and there will be lessons to be drawn from the different examples, from different issues, which will be part of our training. But as Mr. Partington says, at the end of the day, it is down to the members to take a balanced view on the advice that we're given and contained here in the papers.
Make us come back. Yes, it wasn't really doubting that sort of lessons learned review goes on internally, but really for councillors to take part in it as well, of those ones that have caused us grief, that have been upheld by the planning inspector.
I mean, what I would suggest for those individual applications, obviously we would be here some time discussing those tonight. Oh, yeah. But certainly, if further information is required, I either speak to myself or as part of future training courses with members, we can again look at those specific cases and learn from the whole process. Additionally, some of the recommendations that officers gave were to approve, but members refused, and those appeals were dismissed. So you have to look at both sides, and this is, for example, where the Greenbelt training comes in.
Just touching on training, it would be very nice if everybody came to the training. I just leave it at that. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. It's actually to come back on a number of points. So first and foremost, I absolutely agree that I think it's important to have training, but I think one of the stats that came out there that actually surprised me, because I thought it was lower than that, and that was 50% of the member overturns at appeal were then upheld. So just as we as members, need to take responsibility for improving our training. The lessons that were learned from those, I hope, are also part of officer training moving forward. And one of those obviously was one that was particularly close to the residents' hearts in Chobham and constituted a very large development potentially that would have gone ahead. Point 3. So the other thing as well is I'd like to say welcome to Reno. You have been a breath of fresh air. It's wonderful to have you. The communication that I get back from enforcement is superb. I appreciate, as I'm sure all members do, that you've only got to look at the number of enforcement cases in Windlesham and Chobham and realise that I actually probably spent a little bit more time in contact with enforcement than other members in the chamber. And part of that is because my residents understand that things will be looked at and will be actioned. And actually it's absolutely wonderful, even if I'm going back with what they see as bad news, to be able to go back to them and communicate with them and for them to know that things have been investigated. So thank you for that. I appreciate on this that we've looked at the major and substantial cases. The majority of the cases don't fall into that category, but they are felt very strongly by residents. And so with that in mind, I wonder if we can have a timescale, please. And I'm going to pin you to a timescale if I can, even if it is a three-month window for resolution for 3.1 and 4.1 within the report. So that is for ease when uniform is going to be able to give us performance reports, and when the enforcement register will be open. So I know that there's IT effort that's involved in that. I appreciate that the IT effort is fairly low down the priority list for the council, but it is not low down the priority list for residents, particularly those residents in the wards that I represent. Thank you.
Being slightly put on the spot there with this one. Uniform is a very, very complex system, and the council hasn't had it long enough for all the teething problems to be ironed out, either by IT itself or officers' usage of it, and then the subsequent combination of both of them included. And the concern I've got to put a timescale to resolve this. One, it's not just purely one, the whole IT system is split up into sections and used by different departments. So both planning, the appeals teams, IHS, and everybody's using uniform in one way or another, but they're all interlinked as well. So when IT tinkers with, for instance, one element of enforcement, it has got a knock-on effect throughout, potentially affecting both appeals and all planning, for instance. And thereby, to say we can do it within a year, for instance, that would have to include the limited resources of IT that we are currently experiencing. But also regarding the actual elements of officer training as a continuous process.
I don't want to cut across Mr. van der Hoeven, but I just want to come in as a lead for IT and corporate enforcement. I think what I would like to just say is could we please take this away and I can talk to IT and with the team and come up with some dates for you and share that with the planning committee so they have a planned date for when these things will be done. So if that is acceptable to the committee, I will do that in the next week to get you some dates.
Thanks very much. If I could just come back on that. That would be really helpful. I have to say that this is something that was raised already some considerable time ago from our perspective. I appreciate from your perspective, you must feel like you have moved forward in leaps and bounds, but from our perspective, it was raised a long time ago. And other authorities do appear to be able to get this data out of uniform. So on that basis, yes, we would welcome that, but if it could be seen, please, as a priority, and if it is a really long time coming, then I think maybe we need to look at an interim solution to this, whether that's using something like Airtable or something else, which is a simple download, upload, limited view, Google Docs. Don't really care, to be honest, how we do it, but I think the time has come whereby we need to do it.
Just to come back, thank you, Chair, is to say yes, we'll get a project plan for you with milestones that are achievable, and then we will learn also from other councils that are getting this information out of the system.
Thank you. And yes, I'd like to agree with Councillor Wheeler. I always agree with Councillor Wheeler well, I try to. There has been a sea change in the service we get on enforcement, and it is noticeable, and residents do notice this. And it's not only in certain parts to the east of the patch that has enforcement issues. There are other areas. I can think of one that Councillor Tapper and I are getting severely battered on at the moment, but that will be resolved. So thank you very much for the work that you're doing. Are there any other comments, members? No. Well, that calls. I'm not going to look at. Go on.
I was going to say there is actually one other matter while we're discussing enforcement and general information coming back, and that is pre-application advice and the involvement with members, which I'd like to thank officers again for getting, I think some pre-application advice information out to us. It's very helpful and it's much appreciated. So again, thank you for a good improvement.
And it's quite interesting just how much there is or isn't and where it is or wasn't. Councillor Whitcroft. Sorry, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Not necessarily related to the report, but is it, I appreciate that you send out weekly lists. Is it possible to have a weekly list of the approved planning permissions that are done under delegated? The reason I ask for this is that we often find that we obviously go through issues and applications with both residents and applicants, and the next thing we know, this building has just appeared out of nowhere, and because we don't know that by delegated it's been approved. So I wonder possibly, is it possible to do that on a weekly basis as you do with the weekly list we get at the moment, please?
Yeah, just to confirm, we do already have a weekly list of determined applications, but I'll check on my colleagues and technical support to ensure that you're actually being sent that and how that's actually been sent out at the moment. I'll just check if other members are receiving that.
Well, I get it either sometimes Friday, sometimes Monday. If it's Friday, it's definite reading for the weekend, and it should go to all members of the planning committee.
Sorry, is that,
I don't think it does.
No.
sorry, is that determined? That's determined list as opposed to list of applications received?
All applications that have been determined in that period of time. We'll get that to all members of the planning committee. It should be coming to you, and we'll pick that up.
I've never had that.
Mr. Scott is making a note as we speak, but yeah, there is one, and make sure we get it. Yeah, thank you. Right, end of the meeting, end of an era. I think it's disgraceful that Mrs. Rickard has been allowed to retire. Absolutely disgraceful, and it's an issue I've been trying to take up with the chief executive, but he won't speak to me. Jenny, yeah, personally, I'd love to thank you for all your help and assistance you've given us, and given me personally and the committees and the guidance over the years. And I just don't know what you're going to do with your time, and you can't go to breakfast at Bill's in Reading every day, because no.
I think there might be some temporary short-term gaps here, actually.
Yes, we look forward to seeing you as our next consultant. And our next meeting with the very large, now excuse me, phrases before it starts off the group. Our next meeting with Mr. Griffith is on the 17th of June. As I say, thanks that we. And Kirsty, thank you for that. Kirsty, are you going to close us down now?
Yep, I'll stop the live stream now. Just give me a second.
Right, sorry, Kirsty, wait. We have to do a review of the exempt items. And we look to our Monitoring officer, you're going to?
I was going to.
Please.
I was just going to say, members, can I just confirm that you agreed that the elements of the 154 Guildford Road papers remain exempt?
Agreed. Yeah, that was a good point. Thank you for that. Yes, it remains agreed. Thank you, Kirsty. You're going to close us down. Thank you very much, anybody that's still